Hello everyone, I am No Have Name I Want, otherwise known as Patrick, and in this episode of Legacy's Allure's Beginner Guide, I'm going to be going over health and damage breakpoints. Now essentially what this means is, every unit in the game has a most units in the game have a damage value and a health value. Damage is how much damage they deal, obviously, and health is how much damage they can take before they are considered dead. And essentially, I'm trying to teach you at what point you want your opponent's health to be at, and at what point you want your unit's health to be at. So I have a couple of representations here. This first one, you have Norfang Great Hunter. The keywords don't matter, but it has 3 damage and 3 health. You have a Tether Archer here, who I'm just using as a ranged archer unit. He's mainly here just to do chip damage. And we have a Bull Elk, which has 4 power and 6 health. And over here there's a Grunt with 3 power, 4 health, a Hellbear with 3 power and 6 health, and a Vesuvian Disruptor who has 3 power and 5 health. Completely different health values, just one extra for each one. And I'm trying to explain why having certain health values is really good, and why having, if it gets to a certain point, why it's really bad. So, for example, let's look at the Great Hunter. All things considered, Great Hunter is a good unit. For Sylvan, anyways, it's very fast. It's does some good damage. It has backstab. So, all things considered, it's a good unit. But in this scenario, when it's against units that all have 3 damage, it's very tricky to use it simply because it dies to all these units. If it were to attack any one of these units, it would then die afterwards. Of course, with backstab, it would get a damage off and then it wouldn't die, but since it doesn't finish any of them off, it's then a sitting duck, and then it can immediately get killed by the other unit. So, for all things considered, 3 health on the Great Hunter is very risky because it's only going up against units with 3 power. And with its 3 power, it actually can't finish any of these units off, as we've discussed before. All these enemy units have just too much health for it to uh, kill. They would always live with at least 1 health. However, if we use, let's say, the Tether Archer, it can shoot, let's say, this Grunt here, hit it for 1 damage, so it has 3 health left. And then, now, all of a sudden, the Great Hunter has a target it can kill. All of a sudden, the Grunt having 4 health doesn't matter anymore, since now it's one-shottable. So the Grunt having 1 health was good at the beginning, since it deterred the Great Hunter from just running in and stabbing the Grunt. But now that it's at 3 health, it's essentially at the point where its health doesn't matter anymore, if that makes sense. It dies to 1 hit to basically anything, so it having 3 health isn't really important at this point. It's considered, you might as well have 1 health, this Grunt, because it doesn't matter that it has those 2 extra health points. It dies to the Great Hunter anyway. So that is something you need to be careful of. Is yes, it has 4 health to start off with, so it can survive a Great Hunter. But if it just gets shot by 1 damage, all of a sudden it's in the red zone. It's very easy for the Grunt to die. Traversely, since it does have another great damage breakpoint is 4 damage. I forgot to mention this, but the most common damage in the game is 3. I forgot to mention this beforehand, but 3 damage is probably the most common damage type. So having 4 health is really good because it forces. It takes 2 hits to kill it, which is always good. So if the grunt, since the grunt has 4 health, it's a good unit. It's a really good frontlining unit since it usually takes 2 hits to kill it. On the other hand, having 4 damage is also really good because since a lot of units like to have just 4 health, since a lot of people know 3 damage is the most common damage number, therefore 4 health is just good because it usually takes 2 hits for most things to kill it. But the bull elk, since it has 4 damage, it can just run in and kill the grunt, no problem. No biggie. So 3 and 4 damage is usually what you're looking for in a damaging unit, a damaging charging unit, since those are very common and those are all very good. And conversely, having more than 3 health is good, but having more than 4 health is extremely good, like the Disruptor here. Since it has 5 health, the bull elk can't just run up and kill it. You would then need help from the archer to run up and shoot it to get it down to 4 health, which then the bull elk can then kill. So, just like how 4 health was really good since 3 damage is very common, having 5 health is also really good since 4 damage is also a very common thing people like to run. So 5 health is also really good. And lastly, we have the Hellbear, which has 6 health. Now 6 health is also a really good health point to be at, since even if the archer were to shoot the Hellbear, it goes down to 5 health, it still doesn't die to anything. The bull elk can't charge it and kill it, and the same thing as the Great Hunter can't charge and kill it. So since it has that 5 health, or it's at 6 health, it's able to take the chip damage from the archer and still be able to be aggressive since it's not in threat of dying anymore. So this is usually a representation of melee units, or not melee, but frontline units. Something to be in mind of is the certain damage and health breakpoints for those frontline units is very important, since essentially you have to think of it like if the grunt has 3 health and all the things that are threatening to kill it have 3 damage, you essentially have to play it as though that grunt had 1 health, since everything's going to kill it in 1 hit anyway, so you have to play it as though it had 1 health. So you can either play it as just, okay, well, I just want to get a damage in since it's going to die anyway, or I want to keep it just outside of range so that it's safe, or play it behind stuff or something. So you have to be mindful of how much damage your opponent is going to do, or including chip damage, because yes, the grunt has 4 health, but if it just gets chipped once by an archer, all of a sudden it's one-shottable. It's not in a good spot. And then over here we have a good representation of backline units, essentially, or flankers. So for the red side, we have Goblin Flanker and Goblin Archer. These are two very common flanking units that essentially just want to get to your backline and just start sniping at your backline units. And here we have very common backline units. So backline units obviously have a lot less health than frontline units, and they obviously have very poor damage. So for the Goblin Flanker and Goblin Archer, they have actually really good health at 2. That might seem weird, but all things considering, that's good health to have, since most backline units only deal 1 damage, if any. A good portion of backline units only do 1 damage or none damage. such as the archer does 1 damage, the mystic does 1 damage, and the sorcerer does 1 damage. So them having all this damage isn't really gonna do anything, since it takes 2 hits to kill the flanker, and it takes 2 hits to kill the archer, which means they can obviously threaten to get another kill and then start of the next round. And then here we also have different health points. So there's 1, 2, and 3. These are pretty much most of the health backline units have is 1, 2, or 3. And each one has its ups and downs, obviously. So for example, Deepwood Mystic has 1 health. 1 health means it dies to anything. Flanker can run up and stab it, and Goblin Archer can run up and shoot it. 1 health is just, it dies to anything. Usually the units with 1 health are extremely powerful though. They have really good abilities, like the Mystic heals units and it removes debuffs, which is an incredibly powerful effect. But because it has such a powerful effect, it's very easy to die. And then traversely we have the Northring Sorcerer, which has 2 health. Now 2 health is also a very important health point to be at for backline units, because it can survive against some flankers. So for example, if the Goblin Archer were to run up and shoot it, it would survive with 1 health. And 1 health isn't dead, which means you can then use the Sorcerer. So you can either use one of its abilities, or attack back, or move away, or do something. So the fact that it has 2 health is pretty good, all things considered, because it can survive against certain flankers. However, it still dies to the Goblin flanker, because it has 2 power. So it's not the greatest. It's good, but not the greatest. Usually the greatest health to be at for a backline unit is 3. Pretty much all flankers, all really cheap flankers that is, have at most 2 power. So the Dryad having 3 health is extremely good, because it's not really at risk to dying to any flanking units. Or at least the very cheap flanking units, because if the flanker were to try and stab it, it would live with 1 health. So it can be self-sufficient. You don't need to protect it as much. You don't need to worry about, it has a lot of flankers. I probably need to focus more on front line than back line, since of all the flankers they have. 3 health is a very good health point to be at for a backline unit. But obviously, 3 health is pretty much the most a backline unit gets. And as we talked about the frontline portion, 3 damage is very, very common. So it's very good against flankers, but against most of the units in the game, not so much, since it's just going to get hit in 1 hit. It's going to get 1 hit anyway. I think that's about it. So anyways, I hope I was clear enough. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next part.